These new details change everything for the Steelers as they could look to sign a wide receiver in-house. My name is Peyton Kleppe, and on today's episode of Steelers Digest, we'll be breaking down the latest Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers football team. As the Pittsburgh Steelers have made a ton of offseason moves this offseason, they could look to add this receiver back to their squad on a major extension. Before we get into this report, if you guys are not already currently subscribed to the channel, just click that subscribe button down below, and we're going to get you guys the latest Pittsburgh Steelers analysis and reports regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers football team. Let's get right into it. We got some major news regarding our wide receiver room. So like I said, the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking to sign a wide receiver in-house, and this guy could be Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin was a guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers did take a chance on a few years ago in the draft, coming out of Memphis. You know, this is the guy that he's got a ton of speed. I think he ran like a 4.3 40 or 4.2 or something crazy, but he's got a ton of speed, ton of athleticism. He's really agile. He can make great breaks out of his routes, and the Pittsburgh Steelers took a chance on him. Obviously, he did not have the best rookie season. He definitely dealt with some injuries, but you know, he showed a lot of promise throughout his time in Pittsburgh, and I really think the Pittsburgh Steelers could look to add him to an extension after trading away George Pickens. You know, the Pittsburgh Steelers have made a move like this in the past with Emmanuel Sanders and Antonio Brown, you know, and history does repeat itself. So, you know, Emmanuel Sanders, obviously he was a guy, had a ton of success in Pittsburgh since he was drafted to the team. Had 1,000 yards a few different times, and the Pittsburgh Steelers did decide that they wanted to move on from him, or they did offer him a contract. Actually, you know, I think this was actually about Mike Wallace, but this same situation, I guess, pertains to both guys. You know, the Pittsburgh Steelers offered contracts to Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Wallace. Both those guys were not interested. They moved on. The Pittsburgh Steelers decided to sign a guy named Antonio Brown. Obviously, he went on to have a ton of success in Pittsburgh. So, you know, we're in a much better situation with Calvin Austin versus a guy like Antonio Brown. You know, Antonio Brown had a ton of character issues, but Calvin Austin is a guy that, you know, he's been beloved since he's come into Pittsburgh. He's been, you know, a hard worker. Obviously, he had a big injury his first year coming out of Memphis, and he didn't even see the field at all. So this guy is motivated to work hard, motivated to be a Steeler, and he's already loved by fans everywhere. But, you know, perhaps more importantly, unlike Pickens, you know, like I said, Austin's never shown any character issues. He's never done something stupid to get a 15-yard penalty. He's never really, I knock on wood, he's never really fumbled the ball. So, you know, Austin's only been positive for us since coming into Pittsburgh. A big play I can remember him making was, obviously this was not a regular season game, but this was his second year in the league. It was a preseason game against the Atlanta Falcons, and this guy has a crazy kick return, not a touchdown. It was probably to like the 50-yard line or something like that, but he has a crazy return, and right after the return, head coach Mike Tomlin gives him a big old hug and embraces him and congratulates him, and just, you know, this just shows that coaches love this guy, fans love this guy, and they're excited to see him work and win, you know. Like I said, when this guy did come into the league, he did deal with the injury that sidelined him for his whole first year. So, you know, seeing a guy like this finally make plays and produce for our team, it's just great to see. This guy definitely did have a lot of success last year. He did have a kick return touchdown against the Giants. I believe it was our first kick return or punt return touchdown since 2018 or 2019 when Deontay Johnson had a nice little return against the Cardinals. But, you know, on the other hand, you know, Calvin Austin will be joined by Pro Bowl receiver DK Metcalf at that number one wide receiver position. Another guy is coming into Pittsburgh, excited to work, excited to get to work, excited to play for Coach Tomlin, Arthur Smith, and play with whatever quarterback we will have under center. Signs are that Aaron Rodgers will join the Pittsburgh Steelers by the end of the month as we head into training camp, as he is still dealing with some personal issues, maybe some relationship stuff, maybe just some family stuff. But, you know, we still got to have some faith and still got to think that this guy will still come in. He's not made a decision yet, but I do think all signs are leading to him joining Pittsburgh. You know, like I said, though, Metcalf will be the leading receiver in Pittsburgh. He's expected to lead the team's aerial attack, marking the first time in years that the Pittsburgh Steelers top receiver will be a player that they did not draft and develop. You know, DK Metcalf was kind of an uncharacteristic move for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We did deal a second-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks to get him, but obviously, since coming into the league, DK Metcalf has had a ton of success. He's built like a Greek god. The dude looks like a bodybuilder. He can make those contested catches. He can make those down-the-field catches. And he's also got 4.33 speed, so this guy can still blow past those little defenders. The only knock on DK Metcalf is that, some Seattle Seahawks fans do say that he does kind of play like a smaller receiver when going up for those deep balls. A guy that Pittsburgh Steelers have kind of dealt with this same issue in the past was Chase Claypool. Obviously, I do remember some different times where Big Ben threw up a lob ball, a deep ball for Claypool, and he didn't come down with it, even though he was 6'4". But obviously, DK Metcalf has had a lot more production since his start in the career, versus a Chase Claypool kind of guy. But this is coming off a big move where the Pittsburgh Steelers obviously did trade away George Pickens to the Cowboys for a third-round pick. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers decided to move on from George Pickens. Like I was talking about earlier, George Pickens has had character issues since coming into the league, but he also has had a ton of production. But I can compare this to, like I said, guys like Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Wallace. Both of these guys are guys that when they came into Pittsburgh, they already had a ton of success coming out of college. Both guys played with Big Ben and were able to get on the field early and get a ton of production. But, having production early in your career does not guarantee that you will have it throughout your career. Guys I can think of is Ezekiel Elliott, coming into the league. This guy was coming in hot, 1,500 rushing yards, led the league right as he came into the league. But since then, it was just been a constant decline, and now he does not even have a job. Another guy I can think of is our own guy, Najee Harris. His rookie year had a ton of success, ton of usage, had over 1,200 rushing yards, I believe 400 or 500 receiving yards, about 7 to 10 touchdowns. But since coming into the league, Najee too, he did have a steady decline. So sometimes it's better to go with these guys that have to work harder, have a road less traveled coming into the National Football League. The Pittsburgh Steelers are looking to come in and they're bringing back Jalen Moore, another guy undrafted, came into the league undrafted out of Snow College, but he has shown that he's ready to work for his position, show out for the team, and, you can compare this to Calvin Austin because, like I said, since coming into the league, this guy has been productive. He's been a hard worker, no character issues. He's beloved by fans, so the Pittsburgh Steelers could look to hand him an extension this year or next year, depending on when they want to do it, but I think it is evident that this will indeed happen at some point, depending on the outcome of this season, of course. Calvin Austin, though, is coming off a 600 or 700 yard receiving season. Last year he had 600 or 700 receiving yards coming off of 3 touchdowns as well, plus a kick return touchdown. So I do expect this guy to get a lot more involvement in the offense next year with the departure of George Pickens, and I do expect him to get a big contract from the Pittsburgh Steelers this season or next. Unfortunately, that is all I have for you guys today on Steelers Digest. If you guys are not already currently subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below. Thank you so much. Here we go, Steelers. Peace out, boys.